Welcome to today's historical deep dive. You've never seen a toothbrush? You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You are jolted awake not by an alarm, but the deep animal ache in your bones. The straw beneath you is damp, cold seeping up from the packed earth floor. Smoke from last night's meager fire, trapped within the windowless hut, stings your eyes and burns your throat, mingling with the persistent cough that plagues the village, a cough that sounds like the bells of the church, tolling for unseen dead. Outside, the pre-dawn chill bites through the thin walls of wattle and daub, the wind whistling through the gaps in the thatch like a hungry wolf. You can hear the soft movements of the cow or pig sharing your dwelling, their steaming breath and body heat, a meager comfort against the oppressive cold that promises frostbite and slows the blood. This isn't a gentle awakening. It's a visceral reminder of your fragile existence, a constant, grinding battle against the elements, against gnawing hunger, and against unseen threats, not just demons in the fog, but the very air itself, carrying sickness from one breath to the next. Your hand automatically goes to your stomach, empty, a hollow drum sounding its need. Another day begins with the fundamental question, will there be enough? Enough food from the unforgiving soil, enough warmth to keep the sickness at bay, enough strength in these weary limbs to see the sun set again, and maybe even rise tomorrow. There are no polished mirrors in your world. No quiet moments of self-reflection on physical appearance. Your identity isn't found in a fleeting image, but is etched indelibly in the lines on your face, carved by sun and wind and hardship, defined by the calluses on your hands from ceaseless work, known by your neighbors in the shared struggle and by the distant Lord, whose power dictates the very air you breathe. This raw, sensory immersion into the vulnerability of your medieval body is the first, undeniable truth of your life. It strips away the comforts and illusions of modernity, forcing an immediate connection to the most basic human drives: survival, the desperate, aching need for warmth, and the relentless, almost prayer-like hope for substance. A crust of bread, a handful of porridge, something, anything to fill the void. Ask yourself, could you exist when your entire being is reduced to the simple fact of hunger, of cold, of the sheer fight to simply be for one more sunrise? You feel the familiar resistance of the heavy, damp earth as you push the wooden ard through the communal field, harnessed alongside an oxen whose hot, steamy breath mists in the cool morning air. The animal groans softly, a sound as common to your ears as the wind. The rough wood of the plow handle splinters slightly under your calloused hand, vibrating with every stone the blade catches. This isn't your land, not truly. The furrows you score, The effort that strains your back and shoulders belongs first to the Lord. You are bound to this soil, and through it, to Him. It is a binding as real as any iron chain, forged not of metal, but of law, custom, and the sheer, brutal necessity of survival. Your life, your family's future, the warmth in your hearth, the food in your belly, the clothes on your back, is dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the relentless demands of the manorial system. You work the Lord's strips before you even touch your own meager ones, tucked away on a less fertile corner of the great open field. Your sweat feeds His household, His table, His coffers, as much as it does your own. A sudden blight on the crops, a harsh frost, a dry summer, these aren't just inconveniences, they are existential threats. They can mean the difference between eating thin gruel through the winter and starving, between seeing your children shiver in rags and burying them in shallow graves. And if the harvest fails, the Lord's rent and taxes must still be paid, somehow. Perhaps you'll owe Him more days of labor next year, digging yourself deeper into the earth. This relationship with the land is one of absolute dependency, a constant, nerve-wracking negotiation with unpredictable weather and the ironclad, arbitrary rules of feudalism. There is no escape from the cycle. There is only endurance. You watch the sky. You feel the soil. You pray for good weather more fervently than for your own soul's salvation sometimes. The sheer, unyielding reality of this life reveals how power and survival were inextricably linked to land ownership. A concept so alien in a modern world where property boundaries feel abstract, where physical labor can be exchanged for symbolic credits. It makes you wonder about the modern forms of binding, debt, economic systems, invisible structures that still dictate where and how we spend our days. Who ultimately benefits from our labor? The physical chains are gone, but are we truly free, or merely bound to different, perhaps less visible masters? The seed you plant today feels like a silent prayer for the future, a tiny act of hope against overwhelming odds, yet you know much of its yield belongs to another. Could you survive without choice, tethered to the soil and the will of a distant lord? Or would you bend just enough to fit the mold, praying for a harvest that is only partly your own? Stepping outside your hut, the cold air bites, carrying the scent of damp earth and hearth smoke. You enter the heart of your world, the village. It's a collection of thatched roofs huddled together like sheep in a storm, a network of muddy paths connecting families who are also neighbors, rivals, and essential support. Every face is known, the lines etched by sun and sorrow. Every birth is heralded by cheers, every death marked by the mournful tolling of the church bell, a sound that vibrates in your bones and reminds you how small the world is, how close life and death stand. Gossip travels faster than any merchant's horse along these paths. Reputations are made and broken by whispers over the well or during the communal threshing. The shame of a theft, the suspicion of witchcraft, the joy of a successful lambing. It is all public knowledge, a constant hum beneath the surface of daily toil. There's a fierce, protective loyalty born of shared hardship, a readiness to defend your own against outsiders or the Lord's demands. But just beneath that surface, simmering tensions coil, over boundary stones moved in the night, over who gets the best plot of common land, over slights real and imagined. Status, however small the difference between one mud floor and the next, is fiercely guarded. This constant, inescapable proximity highlights the vital role of community in medieval survival. You relied on your neighbors not out of choice, but necessity. When the sickness came, carried on the breath of the wind, they brought you broth, even while fearing contagion. During the relentless work of harvest, their hands joined yours, for failure meant hunger for all. Protection wasn't from a distant king's law, but from the collective strength against raiders or the harsh bite of winter. This tight weave was life itself, but this came at a profound cost to privacy and individuality. Your life was an open book to your peers. There were no secrets from eyes that watched your every move, judged your piety, your work ethic, your fortune or misfortune. It forces a reflection on the nature of modern community, often chosen, fleeting, digital, easily escaped, compared to a community that was thrust upon you from birth, demanding constant social navigation, humility, and conformity for the sake of pure, shared survival. The fear of being cast out, of facing the world alone, was a powerful shaper of behavior, a force perhaps stronger than the village priest's sermons on heaven and hell. Could you truly be yourself here, or would the crucible of the village melt away your uniqueness, forcing you to bend just enough to fit the mold for survival's sake? Stepping through the low door, the outside world recedes, swallowed by the thick, breathing air within. This is your home, not a place of separate rooms and quiet corners, but a single, shared envelope of warmth against the indifferent elements. The smell hits you first, a dense layering of damp earth, wood smoke, livestock, and unwashed bodies. It clings to everything, a constant, earthy perfume of existence. The fireplace, a rough collection of stones, in the center or nudged against a wall, sends a hesitant plume of smoke upwards. It's supposed to find the smoke hole in the thatched roof, but much of it lingers, stinging your eyes and settling on the meager furnishings. A rough-hewn table, scarred by countless meals and tasks. A few simple stools, perhaps a single, precious chest holding the family's few possessions. That night, there are no individual beds. Straw-filled sacks lie scattered on the packed earth floor, a communal sleeping mat. You huddle together, parents, children, perhaps an elderly grandparent, for warmth, a tangle of limbs under rough wool blankets. Your breath mingles in the cold air, a shared cloud of life, And in the corner, shifting occasionally with a snort or a low moo, resides the pig or the cow. It might seem unthinkable now, these beasts sharing your living space, but their body heat is a small, vital blessing against the pervasive chill of a medieval winter night. Their waste, collected diligently, is future wealth for the fields. Every discomfort has a pragmatic purpose. This hut isn't a statement of status or a sanctuary of privacy. It is first and foremost a survival tool. It keeps the worst of the rain and cold out. It offers a degree of safety from night predators or desperate strangers. But comfort is a luxury you rarely consider. Privacy, a concept that belongs to a future you will never see. The lines blur completely here, between human and animal, between living space and storage, between individual life and the collective need to simply endure the night. This raw, unvarnished sharing is the fundamental reality of medieval housing. A stark contrast to the isolated boxes we call homes today. It begs the question, when survival demands such close, constant cohabitation, does it forge unbreakable bonds of community and mutual reliance? Or does it simply magnify every irritation, every illness, every quiet fear in a space too small to escape? Did they find solace in the closeness? Or was it just another hardship, endured with a silent sigh and a prayer for the dawn? This is the simple, brutal honesty of their home. The gray dawn breaks not with warmth, but with the familiar, low thrum of an empty belly. You swing your legs out of the straw-stuffed mattress onto the packed earth floor. The ache, a dull, persistent companion you barely notice anymore. It is the constant thrum of life itself. Your meal is pottage, always pottage. Not a hearty stew of varied ingredients, but a thin, watery gruel boiled from whatever grains survived the weevils and the rain. Oats, perhaps some rough barley, peas or beans if the last harvest was kind. If the garden patch hasn't failed entirely, a few withered root vegetables might offer a fleeting texture change, flavored with herbs like sorrel or nettle gathered wild, if there was time and strength. Meat is a word whispered, a concept tied to feast days. Christmas, Easter, the Lord's infrequent hunt where scraps might be distributed, more bone than flesh. Even eggs are a seasonal luxury, depending on the hen's disposition and the fox's hunger. Bread, when the harvest was good and the village oven hasn't collapsed, is the staple. Heavy, dark, made from whatever flour could be milled, often mixed with rye or even ground legumes to stretch it further. It is dense, sits like a stone, but offers the most reliable, albeit meager, fuel. The quantity is always insufficient, a meal designed to quell the worst pangs, just enough to allow labor, not to satisfy or nourish. Variety is a concept for the Lord's table, not yours. This is not just a simple diet. It is existence defined by scarcity. It is the persistent, low-level ache that gnaws from within, a chronic condition of the medieval body. It is the primary anxiety, overshadowing sickness or even conflict, the harvest, the fear of blight spreading like a plague through the fields, of floods washing away the sprouted seeds, of drought scorching the soil to dust. One bad season, one failed crop, means not just hardship, but starvation. The gnawing knowledge that the delicate balance between life and death hangs entirely on the unpredictable whims of weather and pestilence shapes every decision, every prayer. Food is fuel for the endless cycle of labor, plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, just to get more food. It is not a source of pleasure, expression, or comfort beyond mere survival. This deep-seated, lived relationship with scarcity highlights starkly how profoundly human lives are shaped by the most basic resources. You work the earth with bone-tired limbs, not dreaming of flavors or leisure, but simply of enough bulk to get through the day, then the next. It makes you consider how much of our modern culture, from elaborate cuisines and global ingredients, to dining out as entertainment, to the simple act of grabbing a snack from a pantry that is always full, is built entirely upon the assumption of food security. It is a luxury so fundamental, so invisible to us, yet one utterly unimaginable to your medieval self. Would you have the spirit to dream when the hunger never truly leaves you? Would your beliefs hold firm when the land fails you, year after year, despite your prayers? This ache is not just physical. It is existential. You wake in the pre-dawn chill, muscles already protesting the day before. There is no easing into it. The moment consciousness arrives, the body reminds you of its purpose: labor. From the first gray light until the sun dips below the horizon, your existence is defined by physical toil. Step outside your hovel, and the cold bites. The damp earth awaits. Whether you are bound to the fields as a peasant, hefting sacks of grain heavier than yourself, or working the forge where bellows demand constant exertion and heat warps the air, your body is not merely a vessel, but the engine of your survival. There are no machines to lighten the load, only crude tools: the plow pulled by protesting oxen, the heavy scythe that sings a dangerous tune through the wheat, the handloom whose shuttles fly back and forth for hours on end, blurring into a dizzying rhythm. Every task requires brute force, yes, but also an intimate, painful knowledge of the natural world. You know the feel of the soil in your hands, whether it's ready to receive seed or still too hard. You know the weight of wood on your shoulder, the balance needed to carry water without spilling a drop, the precise angle to strike flint without shattering it. It's a knowledge etched not into books, but into your very bones and the calloused landscape of your hands. You work until you are utterly spent, until your muscles scream in protest, a dull ache that never truly dissipates, only ebbs and flows with the intensity of the day's demands. Your hands are a roadmap of your life, thick, scarred, the nails often broken or split, perpetually ingrained with dirt. This relentless expenditure of energy, the sheer physical output needed just to put bread on the table, reveals a profound, stark truth about human existence, stripped to its basics. Your body is your means of living. Its health, its strength, its simple ability to function is not a given. It is the prerequisite for life itself. There is precious little room for leisure here, almost none for intellectual pursuits beyond the immediate demands of survival and the prescribed rituals of faith. The mind can wander only so far when the body is constantly crying out for rest, when the next meal depends entirely on the labor of your own hands. How much different is this from the lives many live now, where work is often abstract, disconnected from the raw physical effort that sustained humanity for millennia? Would you respect your body differently, perhaps even fear for its vulnerability, if its continuous function was directly tied to the immediate, non-negotiable need for food, shelter, and warmth? A serious injury is not merely an inconvenience, it is a potential death sentence. A broken leg during harvest means you cannot reap, and if you are alone, who will do it? A deep cut becomes infected easily, and without true medicine, the blood could carry poison through you, leaving you unable to work, a burden on your family or community. To be incapacitated is to stare into the abyss of starvation and exposure. There is a grim irony in this. The very body that is your lifeline is also terrifyingly fragile, a vessel of blood and bone constantly at risk in a world that offers no soft landings. This physical grind shapes more than just your physique. It shapes your beliefs. Saints who offer protection from illness or injury take on immediate, tangible importance. Prayers for strength during demanding tasks or for healing when the body fails are not abstract pleas, but desperate, vital negotiations with the divine. The earth is not just ground, it is the demanding parent that must be appeased with sweat and sacrifice to yield its bounty. This relentless labor, the sheer fact that every calorie consumed must be earned through arduous effort, fosters a deep, perhaps resentful, respect for the physical world and the body's place within it. Was survival, for them, a matter of relentless physical output first, and faith, a desperate hope for intervention when the body inevitably began to fail? The sun is a smear of gray against the horizon, and the chill bites deep into your bones. You wake not to the insistent tick of a clock you've never seen, but to the gradual lightening of the world, and soon, the distant, resonant clang of the church bell. It tolls for prime, marking the first prayer service of the day. And for you, the start of endless tasks. Time is not measured in precise hours, but in the position of that sun in the sky and the rhythmic, echoing calls from the bell tower. Lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. These are the markers of your day, a spiritual clock that also dictates the rhythm of the village. Sometimes the bell signals the start of field work, sometimes the end, a collective pulse for the community. It might also ring urgently, a frantic peal that sends icy dread through your gut. Fire, attack, plague, a crisis demanding communal prayer or action. Your life is dictated by the seasons as much as by the bell. Spring means frantic planting, hands plunged into cold earth, hoping against frost and blight. Summer is long, back-breaking hours under the sun, tending crops, haymaking. Autumn is the desperate race of harvest, the survival of the coming winter, resting on your strained muscles and weather-beaten hands. Winter offers a slight reprieve from the fields, but brings new demands. Mending tools, spinning wool, preserving food, huddling against the cold, praying for fuel and warmth. There is no concept of free time as a distinct, large block to be filled with leisure activities. Rest comes only when exhaustion claims you, a blessed collapse at the end of a long, hard day. The idea of scheduling your time for relaxation is as foreign as flying to the moon. This fluid, organic sense of time, dictated by the natural world and the spiritual cycles of the Church, reflects a relationship with existence fundamentally different from the one you know today. There wasn't a constant pressure to be productive in the modern sense, to maximize every minute for economic gain. Instead, there was a perpetual, inescapable need to be working on survival tasks, finding food, keeping warm, repairing shelter, maintaining the fragile balance of your life and community. The absence of clocks and fixed schedules meant life unfolded at a more natural, perhaps even chaotic pace, yet, paradoxically, was also more beholden to external forces you could not control. The sun and the seasons were absolute masters. It makes you question our modern obsession with efficiency and scheduling, with accounting for every moment. What is lost when life becomes a neatly compartmentalized spreadsheet? And what was gained by living in lockstep with the sun and the bell, even if survival was the only outcome? Could you surrender to a world where time wasn't yours to manage, but a force that simply was? The greatest tax isn't the Lord's grain or the king's coin. It's the toll of the cough that racks your neighbor's hut, the fever that steals the flush from a child's cheek. Sickness is not an occasional visitor, but a constant, clawing presence in the village air. Its true nature as mysterious and terrifying as the deepest forest. You see the smallpox scars on elders, the limps from ill-healed breaks, but these are the survivors. The true tally is whispered in the graveyard, marked by the tiny mounds that seem to outnumber the adult ones some years. When the sweating sickness comes, or the flux takes hold, there is no learned doctor arriving from a distant city. Perhaps a bone setter who knows how to bind a break, or a wise woman skilled in the old ways of herbs. She knows mugwort for fevers, willow bark for aches, a poultice for a wound. But against the burning fever that steals the breath, or the sudden swellings that burst with black ichor, her knowledge is a tiny candle against a vast, encroaching darkness. You watch her mix potions, chant prayers over sickbeds, tie charms of thread and bone, a desperate tapestry woven from lore, faith, and sheer, trembling hope. There is no understanding of tiny, unseen invaders, only humors gone wrong, the influence of stars, or, most often whispered, God's displeasure or a devil's malice. You have held the small, still body of a sibling, watched the light flicker and die in a child's eyes before they'd seen 5 harvests. The cradle is never far from the grave here. This constant dance with dissolution, the body's terrifying vulnerability to something as simple as a chill or a poorly timed cut, grinds deep into your spirit. Life feels both intensely precious, each day a gift wrestled from the void, and yet frighteningly cheap, extinguished with casual ease. This fragility shapes everything. It fuels the fervent prayers before saints, the desperate pleas to a God who seems to give life and snatch it away without explanation. It fosters a deep sense of helplessness, a resignation to fate that battles constantly with the fierce instinct to survive. The ringing of the church bell isn't just for prayer. It's a constant, mournful soundtrack announcing another soul departed, another battle lost. This reality forces us, now, to pause and consider. Could you live with this perpetual shadow? Knowing a simple cold could turn fatal, or that statistically, half the children born might not reach adulthood? It changes your relationship with hope, with fear, with the very concept of tomorrow. It is a perspective born from constant vulnerability, a testament to resilience forged in the crucible of ever-present death. Your hand makes the sign automatically. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It is the first conscious act upon waking, a physical ward against the darkness that still clings to the corners of the small hut, a darkness whispered to harbor things that wish you ill. You cross yourself again as you step outside into the damp, pre-dawn air, seeing a solitary crow perched on the wattle fence, a bad omen, surely. Later, the rumble of distant thunder sends your hand fluttering to your chest once more, eyes instinctively seeking the horizon, seeking the one solid, undeniable structure in your chaotic world, the stone church crowning the distant hill. It stands like a beacon, built by hands long turned to dust, funded by tithes paid in coin and grain. It represents order, authority, a connection to something vast and ancient that predates memory. Inside, the air is thick with incense and the murmur of Latin, a language you understand perhaps a dozen words of, enough to know Dominus, Pax, Amen. The Mass unfolds like a mysterious, powerful play. You watch the priest in his vestments, the flickering candles, the colorful, often terrifying images painted on the walls depicting saints in agony, devils gleefully tormenting sinners, God sitting in stern judgment. The words spoken are foreign, but the feeling is not. The weight of ritual presses down, genuflecting, striking your breast, the rhythm of prayer shared with your neighbors, a fragile shield against the unknown. Here, in this sacred space, and in the quiet moments alone, God is not an abstract concept. He is real, terrifyingly powerful, and acutely aware of your every sin, your every stray thought. His gaze follows you from the painted eye in the church frescoes to the storm cloud that threatens your meager harvest. The devil and his legion of demons are equally tangible. They are not metaphors for inner turmoil. They are malevolent entities lurking just beyond the protective circle of the firelight, whispering temptations, inflicting sickness upon your child, blighting the crops, causing the cow to go dry. Misfortune is rarely just misfortune. It is often a spiritual battleground, a sign of divine displeasure or demonic interference. This deep, pervasive faith isn't merely a personal inclination or a Sunday obligation as it might be for some today. It is the very framework of your universe, the operating system of existence. It explains the inexplicable, why the healthy neighbor suddenly wasted away, demonic possession, perhaps, or God's wrath, why the stream flooded the fields, a divine test, why you survived last winter when others perished, God's grace, or the blessing of Saint Anthony. It offers the only real hope in a life defined by hardship and precarity, the promise of salvation, of an eternal afterlife free from suffering, a glittering prize worth enduring anything for. It provides a moral code, brutally simple and brutally enforced by the Church through confession, penance, and the threat of excommunication, a fate more feared than death itself for many, cutting you off from the only path to salvation. It's a strange, potent brew, a profound spiritual yearning for connection to the divine. You pray to St. Jude for lost things. Tie a knot in your cloak against the evil eye. Carry a relic shard or what you hope is one for protection. Cross yourself constantly against unseen threats. The line between piety and protective magic blurs until it vanishes. This dynamic between faith as a desperately needed source of comfort, psychological anchor, and the only available explanation, and simultaneously a tool of control, instilling fear and demanding obedience through terror of damnation, is deeply human. It highlights humanity's enduring need for meaning and explanation in the face of radical uncertainty, a need that has perhaps only shifted its objects, not its fundamental nature. Ask yourself, when faced with utter powerlessness against plague, hunger, and violence, would you cling to a belief system that offered explanation and hope, even if it also demanded absolute submission and instilled crippling fear? Or could you navigate a world without such an external, totalizing framework? Consider the belief systems, religious, scientific, political, personal, that structure our own lives today. Have we truly escaped the need for external frameworks to make sense of the world? Or have we just given our gods and demons new names? The weight of the unknown remains, and humanity still seeks solace, explanation, and control wherever it can find it. Welcome to today's historical deep dive, brought to you by Sleepy History. Prepare to step across a chasm of centuries, not into the gilded halls of kings, but into the mud and smoke of ordinary lives. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's a world defined by cycles, the turning seasons, the rising sun, the relentless rhythm of the harvest, the tolling of church bells, marking time and death. A world where cleanliness is next to godlessness in winter, and illness is often a punishment or a test. A place where your survival depends on your neighbor's survival, and a bad harvest means starvation for everyone. Forget your modern comforts, your individual freedoms, your belief in progress. Those ideas haven't been invented yet. Here, life is brutish, short, and punctuated by moments of intense beauty and profound fear. The vast majority of people will never travel more than a few miles from where they were born. Their world is small, bounded by the village, the forest, the local lord's manor. Yet within this constricted space, the full spectrum of human experience unfolds. Love and hate, faith and despair, loyalty and betrayal. You are born into a role, and escaping it is almost impossible. The church is everywhere, its rituals framing every aspect of life, its promise of salvation, the only comfort against a backdrop of constant uncertainty. You live closer to the soil, to the animals, to the raw forces of nature than you can possibly imagine. Your hands are calloused, your back aches, and your greatest hope is simply to see another sunrise, another harvest gathered. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin, and live the life they never got to finish. The midwife's hands are stained crimson, her breath ragged in the cramped, smoky room. Outside, the hens scratch listlessly in the mud. Inside, another life begins its perilous journey, or ends before it truly starts. You've witnessed births, messy, dangerous affairs conducted by women, shut away in the dim, drafty confines of a hut, often ending in tragedy. The mother screams, the child struggles for air, and the air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and fear. There are no doctors here, only the wisdom of generations, passed down through hushed voices and practical, often brutal, methods. If the child is stillborn or dies within moments, the grief is sharp, a primal keening, but brief. Survival demands you return to work quickly. The soul is the concern now. Was it baptized in time? Unbaptized infants are buried in unconsecrated ground, outside the churchyard walls, a chilling fate that underscores the absolute centrality of the Church's authority, even over the dead. It's a quiet damnation, a physical manifestation of spiritual exclusion. Marriage is rarely about romantic love as you understand it. It's a practical arrangement, often brokered between families, to unite small land holdings, consolidate resources, or simply ensure the continuation of labor for the manor. The ceremony is less about flowers and vows of eternal passion, more about binding two families together, securing their place in the village hierarchy. The celebration involves whatever food and drink can be mustered. Maybe a slaughtered pig if you're lucky, rough ale, bread hard as rock. It's a communal event, marked by ribald jokes and hopeful toasts to fertility. For children, mean more hands to work the fields, more security in old age. The coupling is expected to be fruitful, a continuation of the cycle, not merely a private bond. And then comes death. Burials are simple, swift affairs. The body is washed, perhaps wrapped in a simple linen shroud, a coin sometimes placed over an eye or in the hand, not for passage into the underworld, but perhaps a lingering echo of older beliefs, or simply a final gesture of respect. There are no elaborate embalmings, no long wakes. The body is carried to the churchyard. Burial near the church walls is a sign of respect, a proximity to the sacred ground that might benefit the soul. Those who died unbaptized, or who committed suicide, or were deemed heretical, are relegated to the unconsecrated ground, a stark physical separation mirroring their perceived spiritual state. Grief is real, a physical ache in the chest, a hollow space in the family. But survival demands you return to the fields, the loom, the forge. The living must continue. These fundamental life events, birth, marriage, death, are stripped down to their rawest forms, public and communal, rather than private and medicalized. There is little ceremony compared to modern standards, reflecting the harsh pragmatism of a world where the focus is on the continuity of the group and the soul's fate, not individual sentiment or elaborate rites. Your neighbors see you born, see you married, see you buried. Your life is lived under their gaze. It underscores how societies ritualize key transitions and how those rituals reflect core values. In this case, survival, practicality, and religious obedience above all else. The irony hangs heavy. A society so deeply concerned with the eternal fate of the soul treats the earthly vessel with such haste once the spirit is gone. Could you face these moments with such stark realism? Accepting the quickening and the passing as simply part of the unavoidable rhythm of existence, a harsh counterpoint to the tolling bell that marks the inevitable. Was it faith that calmed the fear surrounding these events? Or simply the numbing acceptance that death was always a neighbor? And so their lives unfolded, not in grand narratives or sweeping historical changes, but in the quiet, persistent acts of survival. The planting of a seed, the patching of a roof, the sharing of a loaf of bread. They didn't invent machines that would change the world, or write philosophies that would echo through the ages. Their legacy isn't carved in marble or recorded in extensive histories. It's in the fields they cleared, the villages they built stone by stone, the very language we speak that still carries the weight of their struggle and resilience. When we look honestly at these ordinary, vanished people, the peasant woman who buried 3 children before the age of 30, the serf who spent his entire life tied to a single plot of land, the blacksmith who shaped iron while believing in forest sprites, we gain a profound understanding of the bedrock of human experience. We see how fear and faith were not opposing forces, but intertwined threads woven into the fabric of daily life. We witness the sheer, unromanticized grit it takes to simply endure when the odds are stacked against you. When famine, disease, and violence are constant threats. What remains of them in us? Perhaps it's the deep, unconscious rhythm of the seasons that still calls to us, or the comfort found in simple, shared meals. Perhaps it's the echo of community interdependence, a faint memory in our hyper-individualized world. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, every calloused hand that shaped the world around them, built the foundations of the societies that came after. The world we now take for granted, unaware of the millions of quiet lives that made it possible. The dust rises first, a low cloud on the horizon. Then the sound, the steady, heavy beat of hooves on the packed earth track leading to the village. Every head turns. A hush falls over the small market square. The babble of chickens and bartering voices suddenly muted. He is here, the Lord's bailiff, a figure astride a solid horse, clad in practical, authority-backed wool and leather, a potent reminder in flesh and blood of who holds true power here. He rides into the heart of your world, his gaze sweeping across the thatch roofs, the wary faces. His presence isn't a visit. It's an imposition. He might be here to tally the yield, demanding your due in kind. Sacks of grain measured by his own man, squawking chickens tied by the legs, baskets of eggs counted with sharp eyes. Or perhaps he's here to settle a quarrel between neighbors over a boundary stone moved in the night, or a stray pig, a dispute where his word, backed by the distant authority of the Lord on his manor, is final, irrefutable law. More often, he's here to enforce the Lord's will regarding boom work, the mandatory labor on the domain lands, or to ensure no one dares grind grain or bake bread in their own hearths without paying the required fee for using the Lord's mill and oven. There is no arguing. There is no appeal in the modern sense. Justice is dispensed swiftly, often arbitrarily, its shape bending to the bailiff's mood, the Lord's whim, or who last offered a fatter chicken. For you, the common person, the serf bound to the land, there is little recourse. Your safety, your very survival, hinges on navigating this absolute, top-down structure. It demands a constant performance, knowing when to show deference, when to plead your case with downcast eyes and trembling hands, and when simply to endure the unfairness like a winter storm. This is a world utterly alien to the concept of inherent rights. You exist at the Lord's tolerance, the law, his decree, not a safeguard for your person. It feels inescapable, like the horizon itself. This stark reality stands in chilling contrast to the ideas we hold dear today. Democracy, the rule of law, individual liberties. Your life here is not your own in the ways we understand it. It prompts a deep, unsettling reflection. Are there structures of power we navigate even now that feel just as inescapable, just as absolute in their impact on our daily lives, simply less visible than a man on a horse demanding your grain? Would you survive in such a world where your will means nothing against the hand that feeds you and takes from you? Or would you bend just enough to fit the mold, hoping the harvest is good enough for you both? The grinding wheel of labor slows. The air, usually thick with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke, carries something else today. The faint promise of roasting meat, a scent as rare and precious as a saint's relic. It is St. Michael's Day, perhaps, or the Feast of Our Lady, a blessed pause granted by the Church, a tiny bubble of plenty in a life of scarcity. You feel the lightness in your limbs, a foreign sensation after weeks bent double in the fields. The village green is alive, not with the clatter of tools, but with the murmur of voices and the hesitant pluck of a lute. Children, usually solemn little adults, chase each other with shrieks of real joy. Tables are set, rough planks on trestles, laden with bread, cheese, and perhaps a true wonder, chunks of pork or goose roasted over an open fire, dripping fat into the flames. This is more than just a meal. It is a communal sacrament, a shared moment where the perpetual ache of hunger recedes, replaced by the simple warmth of fullness. Ale flows freely, blurring the edges of hardship. You laugh louder than you have in months, perhaps years. Stories are told, old legends of heroes and demons, simple jokes that pass the time. Songs rise into the twilight, rough but heartfelt, voices joined in a harmony born of shared struggle and fleeting celebration. These moments, born of collective effort and the brief bounty of a successful harvest or a patron saint's blessing, are intensely felt. They are the threads of gold woven into the sackcloth of your existence, remembered and savored long after the last crumb is gone and the gnawing emptiness returns. This shared feast, this rare taste of meat, this single day free from the weight of the earth, it is your medieval self's highest luxury. Ask yourself, is true joy only possible when it is this desperately earned? But even in the glow of shared food and ale, the shadows of everyday friction linger. The closeness that binds you in celebration is the same closeness that can choke. Old resentments, buried under the necessity of cooperation, can surface with the loosening of tongues. You eye Thomas over the communal platter, remembering the fence post he moved 3 years ago, stealing a precious foot of common land. Or perhaps it is the widow Eleanor, whose hen scratched up your newly planted herbs just last week. A minor offense in another age, but a significant loss when every leaf counts. Disputes simmer constantly in this pressure cooker of a village. A boundary stone moved just an inch. A cow straying into a neighbor's unfenced patch. A sharp word spoken in jest that landed like a blow. The division of communal woodland or the right to graze on the village common. These seemingly small matters can fester for generations. There is no escaping your neighbors. Your life is inextricably entwined with theirs. You share a well, a path, a common fate before the fickle hand of nature or pestilence. Navigating these relationships requires constant vigilance, a careful balancing act between asserting your rights and avoiding outright conflict that could fracture the fragile bonds of community. Because community, you learn quickly, is never perfect. It is a necessity, a lifeboat in a dangerous world. But it is also a cage. You need your neighbors to help raise your barn after a storm, to share tools, to stand with you if bandits come. But you also chafe against their scrutiny, their gossip, their constant presence. They know your failures, your misfortunes, the coughs that keep your children awake at night. They are your safety net and your jury, the ease with which you, in your future life, can simply shut your door, drive away, or even change towns when tensions rise, is a freedom unimaginable here. Here, you must bend. You must compromise. You must swallow insults and overlook slights, because the alternative, isolation, is a death sentence. The smallness of the village world magnifies the smallness of the conflicts within it. A stray pig becomes an epic battle of wills. A borrowed tool, not returned, feels like theft on a grand scale. This duality, the profound necessity of mutual aid, alongside the petty, exhausting friction of constant proximity, is the true, unromantic heartbeat of medieval village life. It reminds you that even the closest bonds require perpetual effort, and that the very concept of community is built on the fragile, often tested foundation of human tolerance. Was it mutual affection that bound them together, or the brutal, binding force of shared vulnerability? The air in the market square is thick with the smell of manure, wet wool, and the baker's distant yeast. You're haggling over a scrawny chicken, the farmer's eyes sharp, when a figure on a mud-splattered horse rides in, the messenger of the local lord. He doesn't dismount, just shouts a decree, his voice echoing strangely against the thatched roofs. The king, a man you've only heard spoken of in church, on high feast days, miles and weeks of travel away, demands more men for a war in the north. Or is it the south? The messenger's words are quick, curt, before he spurs his horse onward to the next village, leaving silence in his wake. Later, by the firelight, the words are twisted and discussed. Was it men or coin? Is the war against the French or the Danes? Old Thomas, who once traveled 20 miles to a different market, claims he heard whispers of a great battle near the coast weeks ago. Young Ilara, whose cousin went on pilgrimage to Canterbury, says her cousin's letters mentioned unrest in the east. But these are threads from distant, unknown looms, woven into a tapestry no one in the village can truly see or understand. Your world is the church bell tolling the hours, the changing of the seasons, the births and deaths within sight of your own cottage. The concerns of kings and distant lands feel like tales from a bard, less real than the threat of a bad harvest or a neighbor's envy. News travels on foot, on horse, on the breath of strangers who appear like ghosts from another realm before vanishing again. A traveling merchant might bring rumors of a new plague striking towns you've never heard of, causing a tremor of fear, a few extra prayers, perhaps a new herbal remedy concocted in desperation. A returning pilgrim, dust-caked and wide-eyed, speaks of wonders or horrors from lands unimaginably far. Cities of stone taller than your church, relics that glow, or roadside bandits who slit throats for a single coin. These fragments land in your village like pebbles thrown into a pond, creating ripples of wonder, anxiety, or confusion. But the pond itself remains small, its edges sharply defined by the familiar fields. The sheer lack of reliable, immediate information is a constant state. There are no maps showing the world, only whispered names of places. A famine 3 shires over might drive refugees to your door weeks or months later. The first an enemy army could march within 50 miles, and you might not know until scouts arrive in a panic, or worse, until the burning begins on the horizon. Ignorance is not just bliss, it is the default state of being. Yet, this intense locality creates a different kind of connection. Your survival is tied to your neighbors, your land, your Lord's protection, and the grace of God as interpreted by the local priest. There are no national heroes or villains on a screen, only the people you see, help, or distrust every day. Would such a localized existence feel isolating, cut off from the pulse of a larger world you can barely conceive? Or would that very ignorance be a form of peace, shielding you from anxieties about events you have no power to influence, allowing you to focus intensely on the immediate reality of soil, sun, and survival? Would you crave the rumors from afar, or fear the disruption they inevitably brought? Ask yourself, is a life lived in a small, comprehensible circle less rich? Cold air bites at your face. The fire is out, a heap of dead embers and ash. Beside you, your youngest sibling coughs again, a wet, rattling sound that never leaves the corners of the room. You are perhaps 5 years old, maybe 6. The sun hasn't even begun to paint the sky above the single window, but the day's weight already settles on your small shoulders. There is no gentle waking, no quiet time for dreams to fade. Survival calls, and even at this age, you answer. Your first task might be to tend the younger ones, quieting their cries before they wake the whole hovel. You are a miniature parent, responsible for lives only slightly smaller than your own, a stark reality where the chain of care stretches down to the most vulnerable links. Or perhaps you must venture out into the pre-dawn chill, nimble fingers searching for fallen branches, for any scrap of wood that will coax the fire back to life, pushing back the cold that is a constant, creeping enemy. Later, when the sparse crops sprout, you are sent to the fields, a scarecrow made of flesh and bone, waving your arms, shouting your small voice hoarse to keep the scavenging birds from the precious grain. Every seed they eat is a bite taken from your own future, from the collective breath of the village. Your tasks grow with your size, your strength measured not just in height, but in the weight you can carry, the duration you can endure the sun or the frost. The efficiency with which you can contribute to the endless, grinding effort of staying alive. There is no concept here of childhood as a time set apart for carefree exploration or structured learning. Play is a luxury rarely afforded. Brief moments snatched between chores, mimicking the work you will soon fully inhabit. Education consists of what is essential for survival: the rhythms of the seasons, the signs of the weather, the skills needed for your future role. Spinning, weaving, simple farming, or the rudiments of a craft, if you are fortunate enough to be in a town. Religious instruction is delivered orally. Stories of saints and sinners, heaven, and the ever-present threat of hell, shaping a worldview steeped in fear and a desperate hope for divine mercy. You learn the Paternoster and the Ave Maria not from books, but from repetition. Whispered prayers against sickness, famine, and the dark. Childhood is not a protected garden. It is a brief, dangerous passage. Illness is a constant shadow, its unseen hand snatching away siblings, friends. Sometimes your own strength for weeks on end. Every cough, every fever is a potential end. The high rate of infant and child mortality means that if you survive these fragile years, you are already remarkable. But survival comes with immediate expectations. You transition from a helpless infant into a contributing laborer with brutal speed, your small body becoming a necessary tool in the family struggle. Children are not seen as a separate, protected class for long. They are future workers, inheritors of the land or the trade, continuers of the bloodline. Their value is measured not in their potential for learning or abstract thought, but in their utility, their ability to help keep the fragile structure of the family afloat. This truncated period, where economic necessity brutally overrides nurturing and formal learning, is a stark and sorrowful reminder of the priorities enforced by a society living on the edge. Children were not primarily cherished for their innocence or individual spirit, but for their eventual capacity to labor and reproduce. It forces you to reflect on the immense privilege of extended childhoods that stretch into adolescence and young adulthood, on education systems that invest years in developing intellect and potential before demanding significant contribution, on the very concept of innocence as a state to be preserved far beyond infancy. These are not universal human experiences. They are luxuries earned by centuries of increasing security and prosperity. Ask yourself, at what point in history, under what conditions of stability and abundance, does a society finally feel secure enough to invest heavily in its young purely for their potential, for the uncertain harvest of their adult capabilities, rather than demanding the immediate, tangible yield of their labor? The answer feels like a measure of human progress, a quiet metric of how far we've come from a world where a child's value was counted, first and foremost, in the work their small hands could do. The midday sun beats down on the dusty track leading to the Lord's manor. You walk behind your father, his shoulders stooped from years of plowing the same few strips of earth your family has worked for generations. You are known as Thomas, son of John the Plowman, or perhaps Little Thomas if you were short as a child, or Squint-Eyed Thomas if your eyes betrayed you. No one calls you Thomas the Dreamer, even if your head is full of stories whispered by the old women, because that isn't your purpose. Your identity is less about what stirs within you and more about what you do and who your father was. Your name isn't a blank slate upon which you write your own story. It's a label, affixed at birth, carrying the weight of your lineage and your predetermined place. If your father was a carpenter, you are marked as Thomas the carpenter's son, with the implicit expectation that you will follow the rasp of the saw and the smell of fresh-cut wood. If he was a simple peasant, you are Thomas the peasant, your destiny tied to the rhythm of the seasons and the whims of the soil. There is no concept of finding yourself. You were born found. Your place is here, among these same faces you've known your entire life, doing the same tasks your ancestors did before you. Consider this. In a world where mirrors are rare curiosities for the very rich, and the ability to read or write is a magical skill possessed by perhaps one or two souls in the village, usually the priest or the reeve, your sense of self is not formed by staring into a reflection or pondering your thoughts in a journal. It is forged in the gaze of your neighbors, in the nods of approval when you work diligently, in the frowns of disapproval when you slacken, in the shared effort of raising a barn or digging a well, in the collective sorrow at a sudden death, in the unified fear during a famine. Your reputation is not built on achieving some unique personal goal, but on your reliability within the collective. Are you dependable in the fields? Do you attend Mass regularly and seem devout? Do you follow the ancient customs at the harvest festival or the winter solstice? These are the markers by which your worth is measured. You are a thread woven tightly into the great tapestry of the village, essential for its strength and completeness, but almost invisible as an individual strand. This communal identity, while perhaps stifling by modern standards, offered a strange kind of security. The anxieties of modern life. Who am I? What is my purpose? Am I enough? Simply did not exist in the same form. Your purpose was clear: survive, work, pray, reproduce, and contribute to the survival of the group. There was a quiet strength in knowing your place, even if that place was low. It makes you wonder about the burden of infinite choice we carry today. Were they trapped by circumstance, or freed from the crushing weight of self-definition? Would you find comfort in having a fixed, unchangeable identity, defined entirely by how you are needed by others? Or would the confinement chafe against the faint, unheard whisper of a unique soul? They did not chase happiness as an individual pursuit. They sought survival and communal well-being, and in that shared struggle, perhaps they found a different kind of contentment we can barely comprehend. Smoke fills the small room, a familiar sting in your eyes, but tonight it carries the scent of baking bread. Outside, the wind howls like a hungry wolf, seeking any crack to exploit. But inside, The fire is a living, breathing heart. You huddle closer, the rough wool of your tunic scratching, but the warmth is a physical comfort, a shield against the biting air and the deeper chill of uncertainty that seems to live in the very stones of your hovel. Beside you, your neighbor, old Ilera, tells a story passed down through generations, a tale of a clever field mouse outsmarting a greedy falcon, its simple moral offering a quiet strength. Laughter, thin but real, crackles like sparks among the small circle gathered around the flames. This is not a celebration. It is simply survival, finding a brief, warm moment to breathe. The bread emerges from the makeshift oven, dark and dense, made from the grain painstakingly harvested weeks ago. It's simple, coarse, perhaps riddled with the occasional grit, but when broken and shared, the steam rising, its warmth in your hands, is a profound blessing. Each bite is sustenance, yes, but it is also a victory, a taste of the earth's reluctant bounty, proof that the long days of labor, the prayers against blight and pests, the endless fear of famine, were not entirely in vain. This isn't a meal for pleasure. It's a sacrament of endurance. You chew slowly, savoring the moment, the fundamental satisfaction of a full, if temporary, belly. It's a sensation your body understands on a primal level, a brief reprieve in the constant, low hum of hunger that is the backdrop to your life. Later, you step outside for a moment, called by the need for cool air. The wind is still fierce, but the sky is an unfathomable velvet canvas pricked by countless brilliant stars. Without the glare of countless lamps and signs, the night is vast and overwhelming. A cosmic spectacle you witness regularly, yet it never ceases to humble and quiet the frantic thoughts in your mind. The constellations are familiar companions, whispered names and stories attached to them, guides in the darkness, reminders of a world far grander and more permanent than your fleeting struggles. You stand there, a tiny, insignificant speck beneath an ocean of light, and for a moment, the fear, the worry, the pain, all recede. There is just the cold air on your skin, the immense silence broken only by the wind, and the breathtaking, indifferent beauty of the universe. And then there is the simple, aching relief of surviving another illness. The fever breaks. The hacking cough subsides. The body that felt like a battlefield begins to mend. In a world where a simple cut can turn deadly, where childhood diseases sweep through communities like wildfire, merely not being sick is a profound state of grace. You have seen too many faces go gray, too many small bodies grow cold. To feel strength returning, to draw a breath that doesn't rasp, is a kind of ecstasy. It is a quiet, internal dance of gratitude, a silent prayer whispered not through wealth or comfort, but for the sheer, miraculous fact of still being alive when so many are not. It highlights a truth often obscured today. Life itself, the simple state of being, was often the most precious, precarious gift. These are the small fires, the warmth of shared space, the taste of hard-earned food, the awe of the natural world, the fragile miracle of health. They are not grand spectacles. They are fundamental, intensely felt moments that pierce the gloom. They are the quiet evidence that the human spirit, even under immense pressure, doesn't just endure. It finds ways to flare, however briefly, however dimly. They reveal a capacity for joy rooted not in possessions or achievements, but in connection, in gratitude for the basic elements of existence. Consider your own life now, bathed in electric light, filled with endless choices and distractions. Where do you find your warmth? What tastes do you savor that are not manufactured? When do you truly look at the sky? Do you overlook your own small fires in the relentless pursuit of larger, often manufactured pleasures? Can you find contentment simply in being, as your medieval ancestor had to? Perhaps true resilience is not just surviving hardship, but finding light within it, recognizing the profound value in the simple, fundamental acts of living and connecting that have sustained humanity through the longest, darkest nights. Chapter 17. Beyond the Thatch. You have walked with the medieval peasant through the cycle of their life, the cold dawn, the endless labor that was less a feeling and more a constant state of being. You felt the pervasive fear of sickness, swift and cruel as a wolf, and the heavy weight of authority, absolute as God's own judgment. But you also felt the fierce comfort of community, packed tight against the harsh world like stones in a wall, and the deep, earthy solace of a faith that promised light beyond the shadow. You know, the small, hard-won moments of joy, a good harvest, a child's laughter not silenced by the cough, a warm fire in the dead of winter. Their world was one of profound vulnerability, a tiny boat on a vast, often brutal sea, dictated by the unforgiving rhythms of nature, the absolute power of lords whose whims could break you, and the mysteries of a God they simultaneously adored with all their soul and feared with every fiber. Survival was not a guarantee, whispered in prayer, but a daily achievement, etched in calloused hands and weary bones. Look back now from the bewildering comfort and dizzying complexity of your own time. Their fears of famine, a gnawing emptiness that stalked the land, and plague, a sudden, brutal harvesting of souls, have been largely replaced by anxieties about economics, invisible forces that shape global fortunes, politics, a distant, shouting theater, and existential threats on a scale they could not possibly have imagined. Their reliance on faith and the physical embrace of community for solace and understanding finds echoes, sometimes distorted, in our own search for meaning in secular ideologies or the fleeting, disembodied connections of online tribes. Their struggle against the immediate physical demands of the earth, the stubborn soil, the unpredictable weather, the beasts that would steal your grain, is now our struggle against the pressures of a technological, information-saturated world that demands a different kind of relentless labor. a constant striving against unseen competitors. Ask yourself now, truly, have we fundamentally evolved from these core human challenges? Or have we simply rebranded them, replacing the tangible, mud-stained threats of the field and the hut with invisible forces and anxieties that weigh just as heavily on the soul? The instinct to find warmth, be it from a hearth or a screen, to seek connection around a village fire or in a digital space, to make sense of the unknown through saints or through science, to hope for a better harvest, be it grain or opportunity, these endure, stubborn and essential as the pulse. They feared the devil's breath in the darkness, seeing his work in a blighted crop or a fevered brow, but still they planted in hope for the light, believing that even in the deepest winter, spring would eventually return. That quiet, enduring hope, that resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, that fundamental human capacity to rebuild and believe even when everything is stacked against you, this is the timeless takeaway. What do we gain from honestly studying these ordinary, vanished people? We gain perspective. We see the raw, unfiltered core of human nature, stripped of the comforts and distractions we take for granted. We see our own anxieties reflected in their fears, our own hopes mirrored in their prayers. What still remains of them in us? More than we know. The ache for belonging, the fear of the unknown, the desperate need for meaning, the simple, profound desire for things to be just a little bit better. They had no legacy carved in stone, no great monuments beyond the sturdy, anonymous cathedrals built on their labor and faith. But every furrow they plowed, every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror or hope, every child they raised against the odds, built the world we now walk upon, the very ground beneath our feet, the quiet, persistent current of human existence that flows from their time to ours.